and we'll get started. Right now, everyone is muted as we come in. During the presentation, we will have, I'll ask you to keep your, to remain muted, but there will be question and answer period. Please feel free to use your chat for question and answer, as well as if you have any questions, we will allow you to, at the end when we have the Q&A period, we can turn on our cameras and see each other's friendly faces. Just to get started here, I want to just give a brief background about PAPOR here. Many of you are PAPOR members, but for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, we are the Western chapter of AAPOR. And so we represent actually the largest landmass on an AAPOR perspective. So we basically the western half of the United States and up into Canada. And annual membership is $20. And if you're not currently a PAPOR member, please contact Jennifer Benz, and her address is up on the screen there. Oh, I realized I also want to take a quick moment to talk about AAPOR, the AAPOR Council here, or the PAPOR Council here. People pictured on the bottom of the screen here meet every month to talk about what kind of how we can better serve PAPOR. This is the executive council here, and this is a great way for those of you who are new, for students to get involved. We meet on a monthly basis to talk about planning events, education events, networking events, and content such as this. This is a list of our upcoming events. Next month, we have the AAPOR virtual conference. It was supposed to be an in-person conference here in Los Angeles, but it is a virtual conference, as well as we have a mini conference, a virtual event next month. And then this is the first of many, what I hope to be many PAPOR Speaker Series. So in July, we'll have one focused on health and healthcare research. In October, we'll have one focused on journalism and the news. And in January, talking about .com researchers. I do want to make a special pitch for our annual conference there in December. And in October, we have a student paper competition deadline. And we really want to get papers from all fields that employ survey research and opinion research. There's a cash prize and travel expenses for the paper conference. So please write down for those students out there, student paper at papor.org for more information. Do want to thank our sponsors. Without them, we wouldn't be able to have these sorts of events. And as I say in the bottom there, we wish you're here. So if you would like to sponsor anything, 200, 100, 1,000, whatever money you can $20 you can provide. We are a volunteer organization, and so we would like to, we'll take anything there. Contact Natalie at sponsorship@papor.org. All right, got that out of the way in 5 minutes or less, so I'm pretty excited about that. The format for this is supposed to be a maximum fun, minimum effort discussion about, hey, I just sat down and I'm having lunch with Dawn or Jill or Shakari, and I'm asking that question, tell me how you got here. And that's the way. It's gonna feel fast. There'll be time for Q&A at the end. And from there, I'm going to add a few more people in from the waiting room so that we can make sure we get everyone in there. Great. Welcome to those of you who just got here. You missed the background of PAPOR, but that's not going to mean you didn't miss too much. You got the really exciting stuff now. We're going to switch over to Don, and we're going to hear his story. So excuse me 1 second here. This is hello, my name is Don. Don was too shy to give us a little bit of his own background. So he used a phrase in a research post to AAPORnet about the books that you have within arm's reach of your desk. And I actually took that moment to explain that I had 4 of his books in arm's reach of my desk, including this one, which my daughter said, that looks like Star Wars. But Don is, I consider to be a friend and one of my public opinion research heroes. So thank you, Don, for sharing your story.
Oh, hey,
turn it over to you.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been fun to think about this a little bit. You asked us that question about what we would say to people in an elevator at an AAPOR meeting, and I may be one of the few people that appreciates tall hotels because it takes a while to get down in the elevator. And I always ask people, what brings them to AAPOR? Why are you enjoying the meetings? What kinds of things are you working on? And I've been around AAPOR a long time, and I still remember when I first came to AAPOR, And then I was meeting these people that I had just heard about someplace. And when I'd heard about them, they were just not ready to talk about themselves. They wanted to know about me and what I was thinking. And it was just really exciting. And I just have appreciated AAPOR, and I've appreciated PAPOR and the opportunities I've had there to interact with people. So the next question on the next slide had to do with what I'm working on. I guess I'm going to be backwards and start at the bottom slide. This is my 52nd year as a faculty member at Washington State University. And I really enjoy waking up and thinking about a new survey challenge and how to solve it. And I just don't see that as work. But to go to the top, I'm teaching my survey design class this semester, and I'm teaching it by Zoom. It's all remote. There's 25 graduate students in there, and it's as much fun as I've ever had teaching that course. It's really interesting to see how we do this. What I'm working on, there's two things in surveys that are important to me right now. One of them is web push surveys, and I'm spending a lot of time interacting with people in various countries. I think there's about 16 different countries that I've seen people trying to make adjustments to web push methods that I spent a lot of time working on 10 or 12 years ago. And that's exciting, and I enjoy that a lot in trying to figure out how to start with postal mail, get people to go to the web, but if they won't do that, I send postal again to try to get them to different kinds of people to respond and cut the non-response error. And then sometimes with a lot of funding, one can use follow-up of either telephone or in-person interviews. The other thing, that if I were to start my career over right now, the thing I would really be focused on is communications. I think they're the weak link, because once we started doing web push, we can use 3, 4, 5, even maybe 6 contacts with people, and we have to form them differently and get them to create synergy with one another. And that's where I would be spending my research time now. Passions outside of work, I guess I still work, but family is one. Travel to other countries. I think I've been in 35 different countries now, and I hope we get to the place I can go to other countries. Next slide. Where I got started, from Iowa. Sheraton High School in Lucas County. That was not a high income county. And I still remember growing up there and sort of the constraints, but Iowa is one of those places. That's where George Gallup started. And Bud Roper, and there's some others that were associated with there. I didn't know much else besides agriculture. I went to Iowa State University in agronomy, go Cyclones, and I graduated from there, and then I left agronomy, but I'll explain that in a minute. When I got back from an exchange program, I went into rural sociology, then sociology. And when it comes to organizations that I've been part of, AAPOR, PAPOR, and anything associated with the AAPOR port, I think I've been to all the regional associations at one time or another, has been really important to me. The thing I found about AAPOR at the very beginning that I joined in 1979 was whenever the session started, the halls were empty, and that has continued, and it's something I appreciate enormously about that association. I'm also in what's called the Dillman Genealogical Association. A bunch of us who had the last name but had no idea whether we were related got together. We call ourselves cousins by choice, and we've been able to trace ourselves into many different locations around the world. And we've identified now about 20 different genetic family lines. My line we found went back to 1650 in Neureut, Germany, which is near Karlsruhe. Next slide. Pivotal moments in my life. This was tough to reduce this down to 4. One of them, though, that I have to start with was the International Farm Youth Exchange Program that I went to Poland. And it's been so long ago, I forgot the year, but it was 1963 instead of 64. But I was there for 6 months, and I was just about finishing my degree in agronomy. And over there, the people were far more interesting, and the cultural things just enchanted me. And so when I left there, I came back, and then some people helped me make a transition into sociology. The next moment probably was when I became a regents professor or an assistant professor at Washington State University. And this is my 52nd year and going through that process. And so that has to be a key thing. Then there was the Census Bureau. I had done work early on in my career on mail and telephone survey methods, and really tried to write down how to do mail and do it well. And I was asked to come to the Census Bureau as the senior survey methodologist in the director's office. And I said, no. And I said, I don't think I'm a good enough statistician for what you need. And they said, we've got a lot of very good statisticians, Don. What we need is to revise the decennial census approach to people. Can you help us do that? And that was interesting. And so I said, okay. I went for 2 years, but I needed to get back to Pullman, where our home was. And then I commuted the next 2 years across country, and spent 4 years in that role. And it really opened up an incredible number of opportunities since then, that I started thinking about various national surveys and those conducted by other groups. And that really changed my life in a lot of ways. Next pivotal moment, probably, I want to associate it with what I did after census, because I was able to get funding to just do experiment after experiment after experiment on a whole variety of things. And then also in recent years, I've done a lot of consulting on various projects of trying to help people who are doing various things with surveys, everything from the questions to in particular web push methodology, making it work. Next slide, please. I wish I had more time to talk about. And I'm here on things that I've dealt with most of my career, because I just am really struck that when you start doing something and you think it's a really important issue, and you produce a couple, 3 findings that are interesting, that you start thinking about what I didn't do right, or the next question that I need to ask. There's a biochemist that first got that across to me, of how she'd done one experiment after another, because every time somebody would question what she'd done, and well, does that really make a difference? And then she said, I needed to do something else. And in my life, this is the list of things. I started out with mail and telephone because both of them were sort of orphans back there when 1969. And so I started doing mail and telephone surveys and found that the methodologies worked. And then that carried for quite a while. And I wrote that book in 1978 on the total design method. In 1985, I started doing mixed mode surveys. But the thing that happened was I was asked to do a chapter for a telephone methodology book. And mixed mode is what I was assigned. And I didn't know anything about it. And then I kept thinking about all the problems we had of connecting modes together, and the administrative challenges that kept us from doing single mode studies most of the time instead of mixed mode. And then when I was at Census, I started thinking about visual layout and how that might affect people's comprehension of questions and answers, and then the oral design effects. One of the people I started working with there was Cleo Jenkins, who became Redline. And I just was really intrigued with that. And then I kept working on trying to understand them. And fortunately, there were some good psychology books that came out that really got into how truly visual and oral were different. Meantime, I started working on internet survey methods because I thought we were going to have to use those as a replacement for telephone. And that was incredibly exciting. Then I got into controversy. And that controversy, by the way, was what I called unimode or unified mode questionnaire construction, or question construction, or writing questions the same across modes. I had no idea that this was going to be about the most controversial idea that I'd put together, because people who did telephone wanted to do things for the telephone and make them work, optimize them for that. People who did web wanted to optimize the wording and structures for that. And I said, but if we're going to avoid measurement error, don't we need to construct them the same? And now then, we're trying to use smartphones. And with trying to use smartphones, we have less real estate and we're also visual. And that then becomes what determines a lot of how we have to construct questions in our other modes. I don't know whether that quite makes sense the way I said it, but that's really one of the things that I have found fun to do. Then I spent a lot of time in the early 2000s transforming questions from oral to visual. And then finally in 2006, I started on the web push methodologies and then did experiment after experiment on that up until about 2014. And finally, I wrote the last piece I'll probably do on that in 2017. And then I thought, you know, I ought to be able to do kind of what I've never been able to do before that would be fun. And so I tried doing theory and communications and have just published a book chapter on theory. And then I've got one that's just about to come out in the Journal of Survey Statistics and Methodology that AAPOR sponsors along with the American Statistical Association. And then I'm interacting with a lot of people in other countries on trying to extend web push methods, and that's fun. Next slide. If you take anything away from this and what I've said in this very brief time, the main point I would like to make is most of what I've have accomplished has been because of and with other people. And that includes nearly 40 PhD students. I've chaired 30 committees, but there's another 10 or so I've worked with. And they've taught me new skills. And as you get older, you don't do well if you have to constantly do it by yourself. And I think of my students as my teachers because they really have done that. And I appreciate what all of them have taught me and continue to teach me. Learning and addressing new things is the constant in life of someone who's going to be successful in survey research as well as other fields of work. And I think that people need to think about that as the constant rather than the exception. The half-life of knowledge gets less and less. So I think we have to concentrate there. And I kind of think change should be viewed as our friend and not our enemy. And the last slide, please. This is the rolling Palouse Hills of Eastern Washington, across from our front yard on the edge of Pullman, Washington, looking out at the canola fields that are in bloom and then the wheat that's going to be coming on behind them. If the clouds weren't there, you could see the Blue Mountains in the far distance that are southwest of us. Joy and I have loved living here for these last many years. And I also appreciate PAPOR a lot for being one of the places for learning during both the lean and plentiful years of our existence as an organization. There was a time not many people attended, and there's other times that just a lot of people did. And I've learned a lot and enjoyed very much my interactions there. And I thank you for the short time I've been able to talk today.
Great. Thanks, Don. I mean, we also at PAPOR, we've always been a great supporter, member of PAPOR, and we look forward to hearing from you in the Q&A session here at the end here. Now I'm going to switch over here for a second, and we're going to hear from Jill Darling. Jill?
Hi, thank you. And I'd really like to thank Bob and PAPOR for inviting me to be a part of this series. I'm really honored to have been asked to share this panel with the other illustrious panelists, Shakari and Don. I think this is exciting. And Bob, what a great idea. I'm looking forward to the whole series that you've got planned and how that's going to go. So I'm the survey director for the Understanding America study at the Center for Economic and Social Research at USC. I joined there, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but basically because I thought that online panels were going to be a good answer to many of the problems that have been plaguing survey research. I started my career doing telephone surveys, like many people who are my age and people who are still doing that. And the dropping response rates have just ended up causing a lot of thinking about what to do next. And so it seemed like a good place to go. And I really feel lucky to have worked in this field for more than 3 decades. I still feel joy and nerves when we launch a survey. Is it, did we solve all the problems? Did we fix all the issues? Is it ready to go? And then the simple pleasures of fresh data to analyze are really something that I don't get enough time with as much anymore, because I do a lot more sort of management and oversight, but I love that very much. I spent some years on the executive council of PAPOR back in the day in various capacities, and I think pretty much every capacity at one point in time or another. I was even the webmaster for a minute, and I have served on various AAPOR committees. All right, go ahead. So to just give you a quick background, I joined USC in early 2016. I came on with CESR as survey director of the Understanding America study, which is a large and growing probability-based internet panel. We call it the UAS for short. What I work on there depends on the projects we have underway, but all of my time really is just spent on working on surveys in one way or another. Most of my time is spent on working on collaborative projects, either collaborating on teams or as a content expert, or overseeing the work of other members of our US team. But for this last year, during the pandemic, a great deal of my time and energy and interest has really been caught up in first helping to create and then continuously update our COVID tracking survey. We started a bi-weekly survey in March that's still going on. I think it's the only continuous tracking of experiences, impact, and attitudes related to the pandemic. And it's really just took over our lives, everybody in our small department, completely for a few months while we got it up and running. Besides just the biweekly data collection that we have a graphic site that we created that's updated daily with the latest findings. We produce a lot of data products, such as a harmonized longitudinal file. We do, create all the usual things of crosstabs to, and top lines and trend lines for making sure that that's out there with the data. I work with the USC Communications to communicate our findings through policy briefs and media and interviews. We have a lot of researchers who are working with the data, I think about 300 at this time, and they're all working on various aspects of the data, looking at exploring different academic level research. And what we're looking at, through our dissemination is also just helping get information out there that can be of use. We also have a free questions program where investigators can submit up to 1 minute of questions to be added to a COVID wave. So we look through those submissions. And of course, there's always a quest for funding to keep it going. And now we're working on trying to keep it going post-pandemic. So I'm also working on various other things. I manage various data collections for the grants that fund our panel. I help investigators with questionnaire development. I'm site PI on an NSF project. And we are right now, one of the things that has been on my agenda since I arrived at USC, which is a thorough review of our sampling and recruitment processes and the materials that we use. We're heavily relying on Dawn for some of that work. And Dawn, your recent webinar that you gave talking about this and your comments about, thinking about having various opportunities to reach people, we're taking that to heart. And during election years, I also direct the Dornsife LA Times Daybreak poll. And then as part of the grant work that I do, one of the notable projects is a 2-arm study of memory tests conducted online and by telephone. We reached out to Bob's company, Davis Research, to handle the telephone part of that. Davis Research and I go back many decades to a time when Bob's mom handled some of our exit polling work when I was at the LA Times. So these relationships that we have built are crucial in my work and the friendships that we've made. All right, next slide. Oh, I guess passions outside of work, I forgot about, but basically all of my life I've been a gardener. My mom was a gardener. A lot of my plants come from my mom's garden. I love succulents, and as somebody who gardens in hot LA, I'm particularly interested in low water gardens. So I have no lawn. I've really just planted everything out with succulents and shrubs. And also hiking. During the pandemic year, I really branched out from my small hikes that I used to take here and there, become a bit more adventurous. It combats lockdown fatigue, helps you stay in better shape. And there really isn't much more to say, except really, I look forward greatly to traveling again sometime in the near future and to being able to volunteer time in person as well. All right, well, there's nothing really remarkable about my education, except that I'll share that it took me quite a while to find my direction, and I had a couple of changes along the way. I graduated high school in the mid 1970s, and I really had no idea what to do next. I knew I would go to college. I grew up in Riverside, California, and behind me on the screen is the Mission Inn, which is what Riverside is most famous for. Anyway, I knew I'd go to college, but I couldn't really settle on what, and my parents weren't going to pay for it. So I opened a store selling vintage clothing and furniture, and I took classes at the junior college just to try things out and see what I was good at and what I would enjoy. And nothing really sparked my imagination until I started taking math. So I did a degree in that, and I got into a PhD program at UCLA. And I was well on my way through it. I really finished everything except all of the exams. I did all the exams and all of the classes, but I didn't have the dissertation done. And I had to pause the program for some personal family reasons. I always intended to go back and finish, but the longer I was away, the less appealing the idea of being a math professor at some small college somewhere seemed to me. And the options that people used to tell us for, what you could do with your degree were, because I studied pure math rather than applied math, was really like you could be an actuary or you could be a professor. And neither one of those things were really exciting to me. But what happened was I ended up taking a job at the LA Times poll. I was hired by the venerable Bud Lewis. I learned how to program. Oh, he founded the LA Times poll there, and he had been at NBC and CBS, and he had really founded exit polling, or at least one of the founders of exit polling. And he was just someone who really felt like everybody was excited about survey research. And so he, assumed that I was fascinated by it, and he taught me all about it. I was hired to be a statistician, to create all of our own random digit dialing samples. We used some statistical clustering techniques to increase their productivity, but basically we didn't buy the samples, we created them from scratch. And it was fun work. Honestly, it was really interesting. I also wired together all of our PCs and created the first local area network at the LA Times. You had to open up the computers and put in a board, and we had to make all of the cables and wire them in, and I was crawling around on the floor wiring everybody's things together. So anyway, it was great fun. I loved working there. And I did actually really think that I would stay there probably for a long time. And I eventually got a master's degree in health research when I was working for the VA. And there isn't really much to say about these organizations other than what I have already really said, I think, which is that AAPOR in particular and PAPOR have really had a huge impact on my life. They're certainly part of my education. I learned so much from everything from the people that I was with at AAPOR, people that I met. And I joined in 1998. I've only missed 2 conferences, and every one of them I've come away just energized and revitalized. And the Regional Food Bank and KPCC and the Theodore Payne Foundation are all important to me in sort of more my personal life and the things that I do outside. All right, so I already mentioned that I left grad school to join the LA Times. I was there 20 years. And I served as after I was doing the programming and all of that, I served as associate director and then deputy director under Susan Pincus after Bud Lewis died. And as I mentioned, I really loved that work. Being a newspaper pollster was just really fantastically fun. There was always something new to do. And the work that we did was exciting. We worked on big projects as well as, doing a lot of election work. And if it wasn't for the downturn of 2008 and the decline of traditional print media, I would have been happy to stay there. So damn you, Craigslist and the internet. So, but when I left the Times, the newspaper could no longer support its own polling organization. And I started a full service survey research firm, Darling Research, my friend Paul Goodwin of Goodwin Simon passed a ton of work my way, really helped me sort of get off the ground. And I did some work for other folks as well, but it was really an important part of, what I learned about, the people that I met through AAPOR, and all of the work that I did with people and collaborated with really came to the fore then. I learned a lot about working with soft funding, creating products for clients. I also learned I'm not an entrepreneur. I like being part of an organization. So when my dear friend Barbara Simon, who was a survey director at VHA Research Center, approached me about coming on board to serve as co-director until she retired, I was very excited about being part of a team again. And working at the VA was really an eye-opening experience due to the strict regulatory environment. It was frustrating at times. The National Patient Survey I was hired to work on never materialized due to bureaucratic foot dragging. But I still use every bit of what I learned there. And I loved working with the brilliant researchers who dedicate their lives to making healthcare better for veterans, and in particular women veterans. And the work that I did there is still actually ongoing. And the thing is that the research in that center is all focused on implementation of innovations in healthcare. And while I was working there, I did a master's degree. That's when I did that degree, to give me a foundation in that kind of innovative work we were doing. And it was really exhilarating to once again walk the high wire of working at a very high level in a new field with investigators and experts who'd been doing this kind of work their whole careers. But it was also, I was always a content expert on project teams with people focusing on their own research. And a very high percentage of my time was spent working on IRB and other regulatory issues. And the position at USC really promised to return me to having survey research front and center in my work life, which was exciting to me. So I decided to make that change, and here I am today. All right, I wasn't really sure what to say here, quite honestly. I don't really want to talk about myself. I think that Dawn's solution was really good. But I really think that all of the things that I enjoy discussing were on my first slide, hiking and gardening and all of that. But I'm really currently obsessed about ingenuity. What I'd really love is not to talk about it, but to sit down with a beer and listen to someone who knows all about it talk about it, because I'm fascinated and I don't have enough time to really do any research about it. All right, so if you take away things, I made it into 4 rather than 3. And knowing what you want to do and setting out single-mindedly to do it is a great way to go. But there are other ways, and my meandering path shows that you can also get places in a different way. Taking a few classes in a PhD program does not make someone an expert in survey research, despite what they may believe. This means there will always be work for us as survey methodologists in academic research settings. And I love academic research settings. And I encourage people who are thinking about their careers to think about it. It's a great really work environment. Don't be afraid to try new things, stretch your abilities, reach out for mentoring and assistance along the way. People that you meet through AAPOR and PAPOR are your best resource. And finally, read everything that Don Dillman has ever written. So thanks. Oh, I have this one last slide. Thank you for listening very much. And this is just a view from one of my very local hikes at Fryman Canyon, looking out over on a beautiful winter day.
Thank you very much, Jill. Really appreciate that. And for our third speaker, to Shakari Byerly.
Thank you, Bob. It's really an honor to be joining Jill and Dawn on this panel, and thank you to PAPOR and AAPOR for the opportunity. My name is Shakari Byerly. I'm managing partner and principal researcher at EVITARUS, and it's a firm that I run with my husband. We are one of the few Black-owned polling firms in the country. I'm also a doctoral candidate in political science at UCLA, where I'm pursuing a master's in stats and completely insane for doing both degrees at the same time, as well as running a business. But my dissertation explores how media represent the opinions of racial and ethnic groups in campaigns and elections. And the interest in kind of going back to school was because I knew the industry was really changing. I worked at a major California polling firm and had done work primarily on campaigns and elections, but also on public policy issues, working with local governments and public agencies to use research as a form of public input on a scientific measure of kind of where the public is on issues. And this is in the early stages of online polling, where people were kind of experimenting with the methodology. And it just so happened that I would always get those projects. So I thought it was just really fun to think about reaching people online and conducting surveys and creative things that you could do, since people could actually see the screen and what you were displaying. But it was really a brave new world with people trying all different types of approaches. And I knew that since the industry was changing, I really wanted to understand not just how to craft surveys and work with clients, but also the science behind survey research. So what am I working on now? I manage the firm, as well as being very hands-on with the day-to-day operations of research. So most of our clients are political candidates or ballot initiative campaigns, but still do quite a bit of public agency, nonprofit foundation work, as well as coalition building. Most squarely focused on public policy. We do surveys across modes and across languages. Rarely doing mail these days, but occasionally we do some, address-based sampling, and then mail to web or mail to phone type surveys, and then a full range of qualitative research. I really see myself as a mixed methods researcher, and really excited about some of the methods to incorporate text analysis into our focus group research and how we think about public opinion more broadly. Some of our clients and projects that I'm excited about are working with the California Healthcare Foundation on understanding African American Californians' experiences in the health system, working with the California Democratic Party and understanding what equity means to Democrats in California, working on a range of criminal justice reform issues, particularly for the Repeal Three Strikes Coalition. Continuing to do local work. So we're working in Oakland on helping stakeholders there to imagine public safety. We've done that work with LAUSD, as well as with Los Angeles County, as the conversation about racial equity really comes to the fore. And still doing candidate work. So we have a horse in the race, so to speak, in a current special election for Assembly District 54. So really excited about that. In my not so spare time, I also am teaching at UCLA as a James Lawson Teaching Fellow, which I'm really proud of. James Lawson is a civil rights leader, and he was an advisor to Dr. King. And so I teach undergraduates about the history and politics of Black workers. And this is a really exciting time to be teaching that content, given where we are in our country, and just the history of Los Angeles and California on that issue. What are my passions outside of work? I'm not sure that there are many because I work all the time, but when I do get a slice of time, I really enjoy working in my faith community, cooking all types of foods, from soul food to Mexican. I'm dabbling in South Asian and particularly Indian cuisine, so have a lot of fun with that. I love to bake. I also love to fish. I'm a all-around city girl, pretty much, but my husband is a hunter and a fisher, and he's introduced me to it. And so when we get a chance to go out, actually in the San Francisco Bay, I really love it when salmon season comes around. So also love family genealogy, so I share that passion with Dawn, and my family's historian. And I'm a member of an historically Black African-American sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, which our vice president is also a member of. And I really love doing community service as part of my sorority. My education, I did my master's in public policy in 2005 at the Luskin School at UCLA, and I kind of just stayed there. So returned after working for about 7 years for a polling firm in California based in Oakland to UCLA to pursue my PhD and my master's in statistics. I did my BA on the East Coast in Hanover, New Hampshire. I'm from South LA, so it was quite an interesting experience to go from sunny California to very sub-zero cold weather in the Northeast. Some of my favorite organizations are, of course, AAPOR and PAPOR. I really love the camaraderie and how supportive and collegial everyone is with AAPOR. When I started in survey research, I really didn't have time to be as civically involved as I would like, but now that I've returned to school and running my own firm, I have a lot more flexibility, and it's just really been invigorating to be a part of a community where everyone is so open and willing to talk and share their experiences. I'm also active in the American Association of Political Science and working on a couple of papers that will be presented there. I'm a board member with California Common Cause and really passionate about California politics and the future of our state. And being involved with Common Cause and good government efforts have been one of the highlights of my career. So I worked both in, as we'll, I think, go into on the next slide, I've worked in good government for quite some time and continue to be active with Common Cause. I have a bit of a winding journey into survey research and probably very unconventional. I started out as an undergrad coming out of college, set for law school, actually UCLA, couldn't get away from it, and just decided I didn't really want a lawyer. You know, I think growing up, I thought, oh, I'll run for public office. I really want to be involved in government. I didn't know that the world of survey research and public opinion research existed. I just was way beyond my imagination. And so I did join a law school and decided to teach for a couple of years. My mother's a teacher, my grandmother's a teacher. So that was kind of the path of least resistance, given that, you know, I bailed on law school. And still had kind of the bug to be involved with government and public service. And so I did a fellowship in the California State Assembly, the Jesse Unruh Assembly Fellowship Program in Sacramento, which I loved. I mean, I just was really at the heart. I loved being in Sacramento and working at the Capitol, but had the inkling that I wanted to go back to school. And so I returned to UCLA for my master's, and out of my grad program, worked for a think tank. And that was really interesting and enjoyable work. But I always had this idea that I wanted to be in the room when decisions were being made. And I think especially coming from South LA, you know, I always wondered, like, who makes decisions about, you know, where resources are allocated, how communities are structured. And being at a think tank, particularly relying on secondary research, I got some insight into how that works and what the structures were behind government and politics, and got hired away by a polling firm. And it was really a result of asking someone out to lunch who had done some research for us. And I was just fascinated by the idea of scientifically measuring opinion and including that as input into how policies were developed. So I worked my way up through the ranks as a researcher at Fairbank Maslin Mall and Metz in associates in their Oakland office, and was one of the few, if not the only, women to rise to senior ranks at the firm. Had the itch to go back to school to really strengthen my skills. And after a year at UCLA in my PhD program, I had a few clients that still wanted to work with me. My husband had a financial services and, you know, small investment banking business, and he said, just add your practice, you know, to the firm. And now I'm the accidental entrepreneur. So that's been really interesting, especially working alongside my husband and kind of the rough and tumble world of politics, I don't have enough time to talk about all the twists and turns of that, as well as a number of other things, which I think is the next slide. So I don't have enough time either to talk about working on Kamala Harris's presidential campaign, which was a lot of fun and just a great opportunity to be that up close to executive office. And now she's our vice president, which is really exciting. We have a lot of interesting projects around advancing racial justice and social equity that I could go on and on about. I think it's a really exciting time in our country. I've also had some really interesting survey projects, and one that I'm really proud of is having worked with the city of Stockton on their bankruptcy and trying to help them figure out how to raise money in the midst of also needing to go through bankruptcy proceedings. So that was, I think, a survey research puzzle that was a questionnaire that wasn't easy to design. I'm really proud of the work that we did there. And Stockton made it out of their bankruptcy and also passed a 1-cent sales tax for public safety, which is great. Don't have enough time to talk about living part-time as a closeted Californian in rural Texas, which has been really interesting. My husband's from Texas, and we have a vacation home, I guess you could say, in his ancestral community in deep East Texas. Everybody knows where the Golden Triangle is. We're in Kirbyville, which has really been an interesting kind of journey to learn about a totally different part of the country and rural living. Genealogy, I love it, and we've been able to trace my family's ancestry back to at least the 1800s. So a lot of interesting stories there. And I love learning about machine learning, and particularly how to apply that to text analytics, which is part of my master's work. So if I had any advice to give, I would say it's never too late to follow your passions and build a career you want, which is, my story in terms of the different areas that I've explored in my career. Secondly, I would say appreciate the whole person that you are. I think it's, especially pre-pandemic, is really easy to say, work is here, and then I do this in my social life or this in my family life. And the silver lining, I think, of the pandemic has been we've had to learn how to integrate all of our different selves. So, I'm a wife and a sister and a mom, and being at home, especially in the pandemic, it really brings into focus kind of the whole person that you are, and just appreciating that, while you may feel like overwhelmed or like there's so much more to learn in one area, realize that you carry a lot, right? We all carry many different roles, and kind of appreciate and give yourself credit for all the amazing things that you're doing. And lastly, I would say, remember that you're a part of a community. When I first started my career, I was, pretty much in my office typing away at my computer. I wouldn't say working in isolation because I was in an office, but it wasn't easy to know that it was okay to ask for help. And I wish I had learned that early on. And we try to run our firm in a really collaborative, supportive way. One of my mentors said, hey, find your posse, find those people that you can talk to about, the questions that you have, or things that maybe you don't feel as confident about, or your successes, people that can really support you. Don't be afraid to ask for mentors. So, for example, I've approached Jill and said, I want to know what you do and how you got where you are. And she was so great to have coffee with me at AAPOR. So don't be afraid to do that. You'd be surprised how open people are, and then pay it forward. Always think of how you can support another researcher who may be earlier in their career, and to give back. So thank you all for listening to me. My photo is of Yosemite, one of my favorite places. I just, love nature. I love the beauty of California. And so I wanted to share that with you all.
All right. Thank you so much, Shakari. I love Yosemite as well. I spent a summer there cleaning hotel rooms, and it's a very memorable part of my life here. We're at the Q&A portion of of the session here. So you're welcome to turn on your cameras or unmute. You can ask any questions via chat. I do want, while you guys are thinking about your questions, I want to ask a question to both to Jill and Shakari, because you're both were pursuing your education while you were working, and wanted to see if you had any quick tips for that.
Shakari, why don't you go? I don't understand how you do what you do.
I don't either on most days. You know, I literally have a grid of every hour of the day, and I try to force myself to just be really disciplined and to plan it out. It's not easy. I think the advice I would give is set aside time that's dedicated for your academic work. So for me, I know it's hard to get stuff done during the year, but during the summer, I don't teach. I have fewer projects that I need to manage directly. So that's when I can write and catch up. I think that the second thing I would say is understand what type of student you are and why you're pursuing your degree. That was difficult for me to figure out, I think, my first year, especially as someone returning to school. So all of my classmates were 20 and 30 somethings, and I was 40. And so, you know, it's hard to find my place. But I think once I realized, you know, I'm mid-career, not early career, and what I want to get out of the program is exposure to different methods and also some grounding in theory. I wasn't going to learn everything. So just being honest and realistic about myself and, you know, what I wanted to get out of my program and own my program, realizing that the program is for me, which is a little different than maybe undergrad and trying to learn how to please your professors. So that would be my advice.
Interesting.
I would just add to that, really just, I mean, everything that you said was great. But also, you know, when you're doing sort of later career education, you're doing it usually for a reason. And so you're more, you know, quite focused on what the goals of it are. And so for me, I mean, it was really the work that I was doing was just getting clearer and clearer the more that I did in the master's degree. And at the same time, it happened to actually just be that my wife was also working on a certificate in something very similar at UCLA. And so we talked a lot about all of it. And I really was able to just get to be really laser focused on, this is what I'm interested in learning. And this is, you know, and so the extra time that was required, you know, I just really set aside out of time that I did a lot of other things. You know, I don't think I probably did exercise that whole time I was doing it.
Thank you. I got a question from my friend Quinn out there. Quinn?
Hey, thanks, Bob, for your part in organizing this. Is really interesting. I wondered if one or more of you, I don't know that I want to address this to any one of you, but one thing I noticed across all three of your presentations is that your paths forward have been pretty nonlinear. Like you didn't have an idea that this is what you were going to do when you started college, or even when you finished college, or even any. I mean, you just had sort of stumbled or found your way somehow. And I'd like to hear more about how you knew when it was time to start in a new direction and start something new. When did it occur to you that this was the right direction to go, and what was it about new opportunities that captured your attention and had you heading in that direction?
Oh, Dawn?
Most of you go ahead.
Well, for me, I mean, I fell into it. So I think mine is an easier answer. You know, I started doing this work and I just found it fascinating. And so, and endlessly changing, you know, that's one of the things that I love about survey research is you're always doing something new. There's always a new question to ask. If you're studying methodology, there's always something to investigate. If you're just working with clients, that's always new. I mean, it's just interesting in every direction. So that's my answer. I just found it fascinating, and I hadn't heard of it before. I didn't really understand that it was a field of its own.
And I think for me, it was always having the sense that there was something more, right? There was another piece to the puzzle of how communities work and how decisions are made. And when I saw a new facet or a new area of the process, I knew I was always interested in public policy. And so I let that passion kind of take me where it would, so to speak. And so that's why my piece of advice was, know what your passion or find what your passion is, and don't be afraid to kind of continually pursue it until you find a good place to land and to grow. And I think I found that place in opinion research.
Shakari, real quick, Jill was in mathematics and Dawn was in agronomy. What were you in as an undergrad? I'm curious. I don't know that you said it. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. I was in government.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
My journey's been kind of strange to me, but I think I understand it now. And that is that you come out of a particular background, there's only certain things you know. And so you try to think about something that comes from that background. When I got overseas, the whole world just opened up to me. And then almost by accident, certain things happened. When I came to Washington State University, I was here 4 months, and then the students went on strike and they closed down the university. That was the Vietnam War time. It was also a time of Black student demands that kind of juxtaposed with that. And I had a department chair said, well, if the president will give us some money, we can create a phone survey research center. And I didn't know that at the time that, kind of what the phone center would look like. But they asked me to do it because I'd actually done a telephone survey when I was a graduate student, because my major professor told me I needed to do it for him. And I thought that was a good thing. And then it's just one thing after another. And then you look at that, and then there's new opportunities that flow out. And one of the things I've thought about is my career path on looking at different research issues. Whatever issue I was on, it sort of said there's certain things that I don't understand of what's happening, and well, maybe I need to research that. And I just kept moving, and some of that became coherent to me finally over time. Anyway, I actually sat down last fall and started writing out a kind of an autobiography of the transition from one thing to another, and never quite knowing where I was going, but always finding it fascinating to ask the questions and see if I could begin to find answers.
Thanks to all of you for those answers. That's really interesting.
I do have one question I want to ask here. Is one of the things we've talked about here, and it's funny because we didn't actually I didn't tell each of you, I kind of let you all figure out what you wanted to say, and the importance of networking and, kind of paying it forward and paying it back came out very strong in all of your presentations. Dawn, you talked about the 40+ researchers you've worked with. For each of you, if you could give one or two tiny bits of advice for those students out there who would love to, like Shakari, you mentioned that you called up Jill and said, let's have coffee at AAPOR. It can be really intimidating. Some of our attendees are undergraduate researchers, some of our graduate researchers. What advice would you offer to people to ask who want to reach out and learn a little bit more about, sort of mentoring and networking opportunities? Don, why don't I start with you?
I would start in a strange place there, because the thing I'm constantly doing is telling people to write. I have students that are wanting to meet with me all the time, and I say, well, write down what you want to talk about, because I'm trying to get them to think about it, and so that then we can move further. And I found out that the way that I began to meet people was when I'd write something, and then people would tell me I was wrong. Then I could think about that and then move ahead. And somebody posted a question here about meeting people in other states or countries. And how do you do that? That starts with writing down things and then finding an opportunity to interact about them. So I know we have a lot of emphasis on being interpersonal and networking with people. But I also think there's an aspect of this, and I hope it comes out of our graduate training, that getting people to write on and express their ideas, and then a person can pick that up and interact with them and help them and help themselves. I don't know whether that makes sense, but
Thank you.
I've often thought about that.
Jill?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Don. And for especially when you have something focused that you're really interested in. But I really, I have to say that the students and that I work with at USC are inspiring to me in their ability to just reach out. And I have, a couple people who have just come to me because they're exploring options and they're really interested in, and they would just like to, spend 5 or 10 minutes on a short call or something. And I applaud their initiative. And I have also always tended to start with an email about that, just to get a little bit of an idea about where they're going, what they're doing, what their interests are. And then, I mean, I just think that in general, a lot of people are going to be open and available for talking to you, even if you're still pretty unstructured in what you're thinking. And AAPOR is a great place to have those kinds of conversations, as Shakari and I did, and I have had with many people over the years. I mean, if I'm stuck on a project or stuck on an issue that I can't figure out, there's something I'm thinking about, I always go to colleagues at AAPOR about it, people that I've met and people that I haven't met. And so if you have a very specific question, that makes it easier. You can really reach out, and people are very open.
Thank you. And Shakari?
I would say, do a little investigation or a Google search on who you might want to talk to, and just find something interesting about that person. Jill, you went to UCLA. I'm at UCLA as well. Would you be, send an email and say, I'd really love to learn more about how you got into survey research? And just be a really simple question. And I would say email is great because it's low kind of stakes. If they don't get back to you, it's a little easier to take. Conferences are great because everyone is there together, kind of meeting for coffee. But I think that it was really easy for me to email as a soft touch, and to get an enthusiastic response back from someone, it just makes it a lot better to make that connection.
Great. And so we're exceeding our hour here, but I just wanted to, first of all, thank you very much to the speakers here for participation. I really appreciate taking the time to share your stories. I love the nonlinear path that is what life is. And the other thing that I was really I'm glad came through is just education it can be, with education was very vague there. And Jill, you referred to people who were, past people you worked with, or getting this degree, or, people people who work for you, Don. So I appreciate the fact that we're going to learn always.